Good morning. Before I start, I do want to introduce my co-partner, conspirator in this, Suze Miller. Just wave. And I got the short straw, so I get to present. Ask her all the hard questions, please. All the hard questions go to Suze. Okay, about 5-6 years ago, in the DoD, they started saying, it takes us about 81 months to get a system out in the field. That's not really fast enough, given the environment changes today. And maybe a 100% solution isn't what we need. The Secretary of Defense at the time, Mr. Gates, said, a 70%, 80% solution might work better. Because we don't need to spend 81 months, because by the time we get there, things have changed so much it's not useful. So how do we do that? And the question became, can Agile help? So the problems for adopting Agile in DoD are more socio-technical. Things like, how do I take care of the disconnects between my standard Agile products and the DoD acquisitions lifecycle? What about the cultural conflicts? When you do things in a DoD environment, it's usually command and control. That's not what Agile does. It's self-organizing teams. You give the team a problem, say, go fix it. You don't have somebody saying, now do this, now do that, and then that's like two different ends of the spectrum. How do we deal with that? What instances can I use Agile? Is it okay to use Agile? What environments within DoD should I use it? Do I use it in all places? Is it a silver bullet? It's not a silver bullet. What about the lack of validation for the practices? We've seen a lot of anecdotal evidence that it does work, especially in the commercial world, but what about how does it work in DoD? Can it work in DoD? So those are some of the issues we were faced with. And so our objectives were, what are the barriers and enablers of adopting Agile? How do we enable DoD acquisition lifecycle to use Agile methods? How do they do that? What do they have to change? What do you have to do to Agile methods to make them work in the DoD environment, if anything? How do you translate the Agile terminology to the standard traditional terminology and vice versa? If I've been in DoD for 30 or 40 years, I have a lingo I understand. And somebody starts talking sprints and iterations and scrums, and I'm like, you're playing rugby? They have no clue. Vice versa, people that are really steeped in Agile don't understand standard traditional terminology from a DoD perspective. It's like they're talking foreign languages. So how do we do that? So what we did is we used grounded theory and action research and affinity analysis to figure out some of this stuff. We're addressing the operational and acquisition challenges that I've talked about. We publish guidelines so people can say, oh, I get it, this is how I do it. But the thing is, you have to have guidelines for everything you normally do in the DoD, which, for those of you who are familiar, they have this big, what they call the horse blanket, that tells you everything you must do in order to get a system in the field. How do you do all those things in an Agile environment? Some of them, a lot of the documentation and all that kind of things. You're not going to produce pounds and pounds of documentation before you get started in an Agile environment. How do you meet the intent of that documentation in that environment? All these issues are things that we've been looking at. And we've been doing it by action research, talking to people in the field, saying, well, if you did this, would it work? And then we've learned more and we change our direction. We've investigated the state of Agile adoption in the DoD. We're investigating it more. So far, most of it's anecdotal data. We're trying to find out more and more what's going on. One of our collaborators is a gentleman in DCMA, and they have done recently a study on how effective and who's using Agile. And in over a year's time, they saw a 20 to 30% increase in people that would admit they're using Agile. That's part of the problem. When we first started 5 years ago in this work, nobody would talk to us because they thought we were going to kill their Agile. That's if they even were to admit they were doing Agile. A lot of it is what we call covert, hidden, not talked about, and yet that's what they were doing, and they were doing all the translation and showing the traditional stuff to the DoD, but behind the scenes, behind the curtains, they were doing DoD, Agile methods. We're using things like Adler and Rogers, traditional adoption methodologies, risk factors, and it's an eye chart. You'll be able to read it, hopefully in your handouts. But the things is, you need skills, you need ideas, and then the highest level is culture. Culture is one of the biggest problems. So there's risks. Our journey, this is one of my favorite charts. We started in 2009. Actually, John Foreman, for those who know him, got me into this, and he came back from a conference and says, I was talking to, at the time, Blaise Durrani was very much at lead of the Air Force work, acquisition, and they were talking, and I said, can you use Agile in DoD? That was the big question. Well, I don't know. So I went off and researched it, and at the time, the 2008 version of those of you familiar with the DoD regs, 5002, we read it, and some of my colleagues scoured it, and I said, find something in there that says they can't do it. I don't care what it is, find it. We couldn't. So there wasn't anything that said that you couldn't. There were some concerns, there were some constraints, and so forth. And I said, okay, I'm done. Not so fast. We had a whole bunch of lists of questions that John said, go off and figure out how to do this stuff. Some of the issues were culture, meeting the intent of all the regulations and the milestones. How do we do these things? So our journey started with trying to figure that out. And over the years, we have produced briefings, guidelines in the form of technical reports. And about 2 years into this, we had a lot of people say, if you ever need anything, call me. So Susan and I put our heads together and we said, we're going to create this thing called an Agile Collaboration Group. Send out an email to everybody who would ever talk to us and said, you said if we ever needed something, call you. Well, we're setting up this group. So we now have over 135 members, probably, 60 different organizations across the DoD, federal agencies, contractors, academics, and vendors who meet with us once a month, as they can, and we talk about issues, and they guide us through what are they seeing in the field, what are the issues they've solved. They give us anecdotal data, they let us come study them sometimes, anonymously, of course. And they're a very effective group. And then we have an annual gathering, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So we've been doing this for a while, and this year is just more of what we've done. So in 14, what we came up with, we've got a test and evaluation TN, which I just read this weekend actually, and it's almost ready to be released. A couple more steps in our review process. Contracting mechanisms, that's one of the big issues. How do I contract for Agile? The contracting group is actually trained to do things in a certain way. And their rules for success are totally different than the program office. Their rules for success are, I have a contract that went out, we didn't have any protests, and nobody ended up in jail. Or pretty kind of, that's what they call success. Program office, they want a product that works. And they, of course, care about the other stuff, but the product has to work. So you have two different viewpoints here, and how do you bring them together? How do you train these guys who have to be very careful of how they do things contractually so they don't end up crossways of the regs or in jail, worst case, or being held responsible for thousands of dollars of work that they didn't authorize. So how do we help them understand how they can do contracting in an Agile environment? We've got a paper coming out on that probably by the end of the year. We have got some things published this year. One of the things we did was we were able to actually do some adoption support products. The end of September, we had a beta class, prototype courseware, and Agile and government practical considerations, everything you wanted to know but were afraid to ask, so to speak. That should be ready for if somebody's interested in it, see me at the poster session, or tomorrow, actually Thursday morning, we're doing a workshop. There's a booklet that will be handed out at the workshop, Agile Development Government, Myths, Monsters, and Fables. And actually the little gold is the cover. And I must thank Kirk Hess, who's our graphic artist. His imagination is amazing, absolutely amazing. White paper on an analysis of impact of the new 5000. They came out with a new version late last year, and we're looking at the differences and does it make it easier. And actually I had a call last Friday from one of our collaborators saying, and we got talking, and they said, the new 5000 really is helping us. It makes it easier to do Agile. Not perfect, but it's easier than it used to be. So that's a good data point. We've attended various conferences. You can read the list over the years and over this last year, where we go out and we talk about our work. We help people figure out how to solve their problems. We've done some workshops. You'll see one Thursday morning if you're so inclined to. I'm shamelessly plugging our workshop. Shamelessly. Come, we'll have fun. Suze has games. Some highlights. 4 top questions we get. How do I accommodate traditional technical reviews like my PDRs, my CDRs? You know, I have to have these things, they're required. And how do I do that in an Agile environment? Not so easy sometimes. How do we effectively write solicitations, the contract piece again, that require, but not say you have to use Agile, because the government can't tell you what to do, but you want to make sure that they know that's an option. How do we write requirements at the right level? And how do we translate our Agile works so we can see what, you know, metrics coming out of Agile. And Agile is a metrics-rich environment, but they're different kinds of metrics than what you were traditionally used to seeing. Some of the technical reviews we've had, Three Generals approach, we stay using the traditional use of milestones. So technical reviews, you use the traditional milestones. You just have to feed them and translate everything. Or they can do progressive reviews. So each iteration you do a review and then you add to it the next time and the next time. Or you have a technical review that your technical staff participates in, and they solve all the technical issues, and then they brief the management. So your milestone is just a management meeting where all the technical stuff's already taking place beforehand. So there's different ways of doing it, depending on how you want to structure your program. Contracting, we've been told that you can use fixed price. Not so easy, but you can do it. T&M's probably better. IDIQ is another kind of contracting. Those tend to work better. So the contracting vehicle itself is not an impediment. Sometimes it's harder to do your work depending on the vehicle, but you can do it. Requirements management, it's another published work we have. Barriers and potential solutions. You can track progress. You might have to get waivers. You might have higher level of abstraction. You can do Agile EVM. There's actually a group out there that's translated EVM into Agile kinds of terms. There is a risk-averse culture. We all know that. DoD is very risk-averse, okay. But we have to figure out how to work in that environment, move towards a more trusting culture using integrated product teams, where you have both the contractor and the government people on it. Work breakdown structure, you might want to consider different structure for doing that kind of thing. Requirements change on contracts. Okay, software as a service is possibly a way to look at that. And then reduce documentation. How much documentation do you really need? What is enough documentation for what you're building? If you're building a nuclear sub, you're going to need more documentation probably than if you're building an ATM type machine or an back office type product. So you need to ask yourself, mindfully tailor your documentation. In the new 5000, they talk about mindful tailoring. Every page almost says, and tailor. And you turn the page and it says tailor. But do it thinking. Don't just tailor for the sake of tailoring. Figure out what you really need. And then we have an Agile, traditional crosswalks. And it's what we would consider a Rosetta Stone, where I speak Agile, you go look up the word, and you can see traditionally, oh, that's what it means. So think French, English, English, French, but this time it's Agile, traditional, Agile, on selected terms. At our annual Agile Colloquium Collaboration Group, it's called a colloquium, think workshop. And Kirk Hessigan is my savior. He came to the first one, and he was drawing what looked like cartoons, recording what people were talking about. And everybody was fascinated. They couldn't wait till the break, and they got all their cell phones and took pictures. The next year, we had the second one, and everybody said, is Kirk going to be there? They didn't care what we were talking about. They wanted to know if Kirk was going to be there. Kirk was there. So these are some of the pictures we've done. Quickly, because I've been told I've only got a few minutes. For instance, up in the right-hand corner, the different kinds of system engineering in Agile. You have system engineering totally encapsulating Agile, so they're kind of throw it over the wall. Then you have, do you have a V engineering head or a Scrum head for how I'm looking at my system? Agile is not a program, folks. It is a philosophy. It's a different way of thinking. And if you come to our poster session tonight, we can talk more about these. We have lots of those. Our impact, we've had some operational impacts achieving benefits of the incremental and iterative delivery. And we have been able to help people comply with traditional policy frameworks. It identifies risks by using Agile methods. You find them earlier. You don't wait till the big bang. I think Bill said it best. You do it, and all of a sudden, surprise! With Agile, you get that surprise a lot earlier. And it doesn't compound itself. So you want to be Agile. You don't want to just do Agile. You will get relevant guidance. and cautions. We have a readiness and fit model that we can use to help you determine what are your risks. If somebody's told you you have to use Agile or you want to use Agile, you can go in and figure out, is my team ready? And identify early what your problems are so that you know what you're facing and not just be surprised. Finally, Agile at scale has been one of the big questions. Agile typically has been in the commercial world, smaller teams. It's getting used in bigger and bigger teams. But Agile at scale, is it going to be the nice dog or the bad dog? We're looking at that in FY15. We're looking at Agile success measures. How do I know I'm being successful? Susan's leading a group to look at that. And then we're also looking, again, at the state of adoption 5 years after we started. Are people willing to tell us more what they're doing? We're going to do a mini survey and mini case studies. And finally, if you need to reach us, there's our contact information. Thank you.